This primetime Inside West Virginia Politics, the Republican Governors Forum, is presented by AARP West Virginia. West Virginia, who will lead us next? From your local election headquarters, a primetime edition of Inside West Virginia Politics. Who will be the Republican candidate for governor? Patrick Morrisey, Chris Miller, Moore Capito, Mac Warner. 4 men, 1 winner. Inside West Virginia Politics talks to the candidates, from border security to abortion, Trump and drugs. Listen closely and you decide who has what it takes to lead the state. The Republican Governors Candidate Forum starts now.
Good evening, I'm Amanda Barron. Welcome to a primetime edition of Inside West Virginia Politics. Tonight, the top Republican candidates go one-on-one with our Mark Curtis, answering your tough questions, and you'll want to hear what they have to say. The candidates who met our criteria for a statewide forum are Patrick Morrisey, Chris Miller, Moore Capito, and Mac Warner. You can go to our website for more details on the criteria to be a part of the forum. Here's where the race stands tonight, according to the latest poll numbers from our partner at Emerson College. Patrick Morrisey has the most support at 33%, followed by Chris Miller at 16%. In third place is Moore Capito at 14%, and Mac Warner is in fourth place at 6%. You can also see that 29% still haven't made up their minds. Our poll was taken over 3 days and included more than 1,000 likely Republican voters. Our chief political reporter, Mark Curtis, sat down with the top 4 candidates, and they'll appear tonight in order of their position in the poll. Our first candidate, West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. He's 56 years old and was born in Brooklyn, New York. He's a graduate of Rutgers University for both undergrad and law school. In 2012, Morrisey became the first Republican Attorney General elected in West Virginia since 1933. So let's get started with our first candidate. Here's Mark Curtis and Attorney General Patrick Morrisey.
Well, thank you, Amanda. And we are here with Attorney General Patrick Morrisey, Republican candidate for governor of West Virginia. Good to see you.
It's good to be with you, Mark. Thank you.
Governor Justice is the man you want to replace. He's leaving office after 8 years. When he came in 2017, West Virginia was ranked 41st out of all states in 7 key areas. Now we're 46th, and we're dead last amongst all 50 states when it comes to health care, education, and infrastructure. Given that, what grade would you give Governor Justice as he leaves office, and why?
Look, I've worked very closely with Governor Justice on a number of projects, so I think he's done some very positive things that help the state. But we have a lot more work to do. And one of the things that I talk about is if you want to rise in the economic rankings, you're going to have to start to compete even more effectively regionally. So I talk about what's called the backyard brawl.
All right, first give him a grade.
Well, no, I think that it's a work in progress, right? So I think he's done a number of good things to build out the number of jobs in our state.
B plus?
I'm going to say that everything is a series of steps with people. So it's incomplete. We're going to keep going, but he's done a lot of positive things.
All right.
He's my friend, and I'm not going to put a hard grade on it.
All right, given a grade of incomplete then, what's left on the table? What did he not get across the finish line that you will prioritize?
Well, I think Governor Justice, one thing that I really respected that he tried to do is he wanted to wipe out our state's income tax. That was a big plus. And I think we need to do something bold to compete with the other states that we touch. And so that's certainly one thing I want to do as the state's governor. But more broadly than that, I want to make sure that we compete more aggressively with all of the states. When you look out and you see Kentucky and Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, we need to lay out all of their policies, all of our policies, and make sure ours are superior, they're more free, they're more economically viable for our state, they're going to produce more jobs and help us rise in those economic rankings. That builds on what's been done in the past.
Given your friendship with Governor Justice, are you expecting his endorsement? Have you asked for his endorsement?
You know, I've talked to Governor Justice a number of times about the race, and I think right now we've been running our separate races. He's running in a campaign right now. I am as well. So I just want to say I've enjoyed working with him and his team, and I think there's a lot more to go, but I'm excited about my race and focusing in on serving as the next governor of the state.
Let's talk about some of the issues. Reproductive rights. In West Virginia, abortions are illegal except in certain cases of rape and incest or the life of the mother. Do you support these exemptions, or should the abortion ban apply to all pregnancies?
Well, look, I've said that I'm defending the West Virginia law. So the West Virginia law has the exceptions. I'm the state attorney general right now, so I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to deviate from anything within the courts right now. So that's the law. That's my job. That's what I'm going to do. And I think that we're going to succeed in that effort because with the Dobbs decision, the case returned to the states. So far, we've been able to win at the district court level. And I expect, though, that this case could go all the way up to the Supreme Court. But I think the West Virginia legislature did a good job. I'm not going to nitpick here and there because it's my job to defend that law, and we're doing so the right way.
Let's talk about another Supreme Court decision, that in Alabama, essentially ruling that in vitro fertilization, the embryos are the equivalent of a child. What is your position on the in vitro fertilization issue, and what can you say to assure women and couples in the state that those resources will be available to them if that's the way they choose to have a family?
Well, first, I would say I'm proudly pro-life. I was the first pro-life attorney general in state history. Not only have I been endorsed, I think some other candidates have as well, by West Virginians for life, but I'm the only one with the record of being strongly pro-life. At the same time, I would say we need babies here in West Virginia. And I know a lot of my friends who had the IVF, and I think that it was very beneficial for them. So if there's a tool that's going to help us have more babies, especially in a state like West Virginia that badly needs population, I'm for it. And I think that there are ways that you can do this the right way, and I'm certainly looking forward to it. And I would also say that there's nothing in West Virginia right now that would equate to what happened in Alabama. I don't expect that will be a problem. As the AG, I've looked at things like that. So I think that IVF is going to be alive and well, and hopefully we'll have more babies in the Mountain State.
Let's talk about someone who looms large over this election. That's former President Donald Trump, who will be the Republican nominee for the third straight election cycle. You describe yourself as, quote, unabashedly pro-Trump. And here's a picture that we have with you and the former president. Tell us about this picture, where it was taken, what the circumstances were.
Yeah, absolutely. So President Trump and I have worked together on a lot of different issues over the years. As many people know, when he was serving in the White House, I was the AG. We led a lot of the legal defenses for his policies. You know, more recently, I was the one that got up in front, West Virginia and Indiana, led at the U.S. Supreme Court to ensure that President Trump was not going to be disqualified. So that's probably from one of the rallies that he came in to support me back in 2018. He's endorsed me in 2016 and in 2020, and I've been working closely with him. Most importantly, I was the first candidate running for governor to endorse President Trump in this race, and obviously I'll be able to work closely with him if I'm elected governor.
Yet he has not endorsed you in this race, nor has he endorsed any of the Republican field. Do you anticipate he might endorse you? Would you ask him to endorse you?
Well, certainly I would very much welcome his support. And I think the president's been a little bit busy, obviously, with a lot of different things going on. But, you know, I talked to his campaign just a couple weeks ago, and I know that they appreciate a lot of the good work that I'm doing to help advance Donald Trump's candidacy, but also the role we played on the wide variety of legal matters, especially that disqualification case. That 9-0 case, we were really happy because it looks like the Supreme Court adopted many of the arguments that my office and Indiana had laid out. And so I think they're proud of the work we're doing.
Yet there is the possibility President Trump, former President Trump, could be tried and convicted of a felony charge between now and Election Day. If he is convicted of a felony, do you still endorse him? Do you still back him? Will you still vote for him on November 5th?
Look, I think what's going on with President Trump has been a political witch hunt at the highest levels, and I've said that publicly an awful lot. And when you have cases that are brought against someone that are tainted with political prejudice, then it questions the entire process. I think that's what's going on here. What's gone on in New York is an absolute farce, and I think that we're not going to ever support something like that. So if someone goes through a bad process like that, I'm certainly not going to ratify it at the end.
Well, the question was, will you still vote for him on November 5th, even if he's convicted?
Look, I'm all in for President Trump, and I'm a big supporter of his, and I think these cases have been a witch hunt. They're wrong. I've stood up and I've opposed them. I'm the only one running for governor who's been able to do that. And I think that's another indication that when he becomes president, because I think he will, I'll be able to work very closely with them, which will really help West Virginia out tremendously.
Let's talk about another issue that's very close to the hearts of West Virginians. That's the drug issue. Roughly 1,400 people died of drug overdoses in this state last year. As you can see on the chart, the numbers have been high for a number of years now, and we are getting worse in some people's opinions. In fact, I believe we have the highest per capita death rate from overdoses in the United States. As governor, tell us one specific thing you would do to try to turn the tide on drug use.
Well, I think the biggest thing we'll do is to build on my record as Attorney General, where we were able to not only sue the drug companies and get over $1 billion with the counties and the cities, which is a huge amount, and have the #1 per capita settlements in the country, but what we did is we set up a structure to be able to help the people, the victims, the ones most in need. We need to attack this problem, Mark, holistically from a supply, a demand, and educational perspective. But right now, the nature of the challenge has evolved from the pain pills that occurred to now we're seeing the fentanyl originating in China, going through the Mexican drug cartels, and making its way to West Virginia. Number one, we need to list fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. I'm going to lead a coalition of governors to put a lot of pressure on the next president to make that happen, because fentanyl right now is a menace in West Virginia, and it's something that the law enforcement in our state are not keeping up with. The foundation that we created, all the good work that we've done, can begin to bring the healing to our state, and that's what I'm going to do as governor.
You mentioned the settlement with the drug makers, roughly $1 billion. Your opponents, particularly Mac Warner, have criticized you. They think you've sold out. You could have got twice as much, maybe $2 billion, and that $141 million went directly to attorney's fees. You were paying D.C. law firms $500 and $600 an hour to help with the state's case. How do you respond to that criticism?
Look, first of all, I think that anyone who looked at the details knows the work that we did. Let's start and say that the negotiated rate for the state for outside counsel was the lowest in the country. The lowest in the country, 7.6%. The result was the best in the country. So #1, and guess who was #2? Kentucky. West Virginia was 3 times the per capita amount of Kentucky. For people who literally have no idea what they're doing, to launch these criticisms when you know that we do 3 times better than the next guy, and we're literally doubling up a lot of the national averages, that's a great record of success. And for those who criticize it, it's political season. As the AG, I have to get a lot of big things done. As governor, I'm going to build on that record. Most importantly, Mark, I'm the one proven conservative with a record on all these issues of getting big things done. The reason they're lobbying all these attacks my way, they don't have that record. They're not ready for the job.
Let's talk about taxes. West Virginia has one of the highest gas taxes in the region at 36 cents a gallon, compared to 26 cents in Virginia, 27 cents in Maryland, 29 cents in Kentucky. Given the fact that gas prices have spiked in the last month or so, would you consider cutting the gas tax or suspending the gas tax to give taxpayers some relief?
Yeah, I would consider a lot of different things, and here's what it's going to come down to. At the end of the day, everything's going to be about a robust competition with all the states that we touch. We're going to have that backyard brawl with all the states that we touch. We're going to lay out all the taxes, all the regulations, all the workforce rules, the licensing rules. We're going to compare them with all the states that we touch, and then we're going to pick the superior policy. And if that means we have to dramatically lower or eliminate certain taxes, we're going to do that. We are going to compete more effectively. That is how we're going to rise in the economic rankings.
You mentioned the income tax, and we're down to a minute. Chris Miller wants to eliminate the entire income tax on day one. That was called irresponsible by one of the other candidates. What do you favor? Phasing it out over 3 to 5 years, or what?
Look, I think we should conceptually get rid of the income tax. So I think as a concept, that's exactly right. Look, I understand Chris may not know it. You have to actually have a legislature in place in order to take care of these things. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're aggressive and we're setting up West Virginia to be that shining state in the mountains with the lower taxation and the best cost of living and a great place for families to live, work, and play.
We're down to 30 seconds. How do you replace that revenue? It's $2 billion, or 40% of our budget comes from the income tax.
Well, look, I think there are a lot of different ways we can put people to work. Workforce participation needs to be one of our top issues. We're going to drive that. But to get there, you're going to need someone who's ready. I'm the only proven conservative with the record of getting big things done. I've taken Biden on in the arena, and we've stopped him time after time when he tried to wipe out our jobs. As governor, we'll be able to do a lot more.
Attorney General Patrick Morrisey, we wish you the best in your campaign for governor. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Amanda, back to you.
Our next candidate tonight is local businessman Chris Miller. Miller's 45 years old and was born in Huntington. He has an economics degree from Denison University, and his family owns more than 24 businesses across the region. The one he's most known for is his auto dealership group. Miller has never held political office. Here's Chief Political Reporter Mark Curtis.
Thank you, Amanda, and we are joined by businessman Chris Miller. Great to have you on the forum. Thanks for being here.
Tickled pink to be here, man. This is a lot of fun.
Let's talk about first the gentleman you'd like to replace, Governor Jim Justice. He is in his 8th year as governor. When he began in 2017, West Virginia was ranked 41st out of all states in 7 key areas. Now we are 46th. We're actually going down. In fact, we're dead last among 50 states when it comes to health care and infrastructure and education as well. What grade would you give Governor Justice as he leaves office, and why?
Well, from where we started to where we are now, there's been incredible strides made. I mean, really, we were really bad for a while there. So if you look at where we are now, I mean, I look at it simple. I'm a business guy, right? Like Trump, like Justice. I look at it as problem, solution. And we do have serious sets of problems. We're almost last in economy. We're dead last in education. One of the things we're first in is number of grandparents raising grandkids, and also overdoses. I mean, those aren't great statistics. We also have this good old boy system that's been running our state for far too long. And right now, you know what the biggest #1 issue we got is? Our greatest export is not our coal or our natural gas. It's our kids and our educated kids. We're going to fix that.
Given all you just said, give Governor Justice a grade.
Justice, I give him a B+. I give him maybe an A-. I mean, I think we've done some good things. We have a huge surplus. We've really passed some really good, solid, conservative legislation, and like the table is set. And this is the thing, the table is set for us to do something incredible, but we've got to clean house a little bit more. We need to run state government more like a business. We got to audit every single dime that we spend, and we got to create an economy that thrives because we got to keep our kids here at home. And while we're at it, I think we need to make sure and kick special interest and lobbyists out of the governor's administration. I mean, we got to do that too. And the wokeism that's in our school systems, we got to kick that crap out as well. We got a shot to do something spectacular. We just got to get to work.
So you give him a B+ or an A-. What's left on the table? What maybe did he not finish that you want to prioritize?
Income tax. We got to get rid of the income tax day one. We have to accelerate that. And also, I mean, we have an incredible opportunity when it comes to what we have here in West Virginia, which is a really important thing. We have an incredible amount of coal. We have an incredible amount of natural gas. We have more geothermal heat production potential here in West Virginia than Saudi Arabia can produce in BTUs and natural gas. We also got a ton of water. And when you add all that stuff up, I think that we can make West Virginia the state in the union with the cheapest power in the country. And I'm talking about a 50 to 70% reduction, and use that for all of the foundation for our economic growth and development.
We're going to come back to the income tax question in a minute, but I want to ask a couple of other things first. I want to talk about credibility. You're currently polling second, at least in our poll, even though you've spent millions on your campaign, a lot of commercials. Are you concerned that some people might not take your campaign seriously, given all the years you've been making the out-of-the-box, humorous car dealership ads, or can people separate the two?
I think so, yeah. West Virginians are known for having a great sense of humor. I mean, I've had an absolute blast traveling around the state and talking to people, and the people that I've spoken to love it. They like to laugh, they like to have a good time, but they also want someone that knows how to get stuff done, and that's what I've done with my business career. I mean, I'm not a politician like everybody else out there that's running. I'm a business guy, and what I did is I took a very small family business and I turned it into 26 different enterprises with 700 employees, 500 of which are in West Virginia. And at the end of the day, I love to say this, if I ran my businesses the way the government spends our tax dollars, I'd be broke, Mark. And so people know that there's a serious side to me, and they know that I'm capable of doing big time stuff, but I like to have a good time and smile a little bit while I'm at it.
Another guy who has a good sense of humor is our current governor, Jim Justice.
He's fun, man.
Are you asking for his endorsement, or would you accept it?
I would not turn it down. I haven't been asking for anybody's endorsement. I mean, I want to do this on my own. I want to earn this myself. And the people that really matter are the voters out there and the taxpayers. They're the ones that I want their endorsement from. I want the endorsement of the voters and the taxpayers. And I want them to go, Chris, here's the keys. Let's get to work, and I'll work 70 hours a week to make this state great.
Let's talk about a front burner issue, and that's abortion. West Virginia has outlawed abortion except for certain cases of rape, incest, or the life of the mother. Do you support those exceptions, or would you expand the ban on abortion?
I'm endorsed by West Virginia for Life, and I'm a pro-life guy. I've got 3 kids, and I think life is a pretty important thing, and I want to make sure and protect life.
Let's talk about an issue that relates to that, the in vitro fertilization issue in Alabama, where the state Supreme Court there essentially ruled that embryos, our children and the rights are protected as such. What do you say to women and couples in West Virginia who may want to take that path and use in vitro fertilization so they can have a family? Will those rights be preserved under a Miller administration?
Like President Trump, I am all in favor of in vitro fertilization. I really am. I have an aunt who couldn't give birth. She couldn't have kids. She adopted 3 children. She raised them. It was a fantastic thing, but she never got to experience the miracle of life herself. And I'd love it if anybody else out there that wanted to be able to experience that could. I think it's a pretty important thing.
You mentioned President Trump. You are running as a, quote, Trump conservative. You say that often in your radio ads, TV as well. You have a picture of yourself with the former president that we're going to put up on the screen and show people. First of all, where and when was this picture taken? What was the circumstance?
I've met him a bunch of times. I've met him in Mar-a-Lago. I've met him in D.C. several times. I've met him in New Jersey. Actually did a big fundraiser for him in New Jersey. I'm the largest fundraiser for President Trump in the history of West Virginia. I believe in the guy. I want business people involved, and we saw what happens when you get business people involved. You start breaking up bureaucracies. You start spending money the right way. You start representing the taxpayers and making sure that their dollars are spent appropriately. So I'm a big fan of his, and literally I want to make sure and see him get back into the White House because there's a lot of work to do.
Yet he has not endorsed you, and I should point out he has not endorsed any of your opponents in this race. Would you seek a Trump endorsement? Would you ask for one? Do you hope he weighs in before primary day?
Obviously, I would definitely accept his endorsement. He's a great guy. He and I go back for a little while. You know, he doesn't have the real desire to get involved in a bunch of primaries and governor races around the country, but if he wanted to, I'd be all in. I'd absolutely take it.
There's a good chance between now and Election Day he could be convicted of a felony. I mean, there are so many charges against him. These court cases are coming, some of them coming soon. If he is convicted of a felony, will you still endorse him, support him, and indeed vote for him on November 5th?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody else there that's watching has a similar opinion to me. They're watching what's happened to this guy and think it's a big sham. I mean, look at the court case that happened in New York recently. That was an absolute sham. The banks were absolutely willing to do business with him again, completely and utterly paid them perfectly, and it's just it's a sham. It really is a shame that what's going on with this guy. And this is a guy that literally didn't pay himself when he was president. He ran to represent us as people, and he doesn't need to be doing this. He could go off and make a whole bunch of money on his own. He cares about America and wants to make sure that, like, the seams aren't falling apart anymore, because they are. Think about what's happening globally. Without Trump, Biden's emboldened, China's, doing crazy stuff. Look at what happened with Iran, look what happened with Israel. I mean, this is a crazy world, and Trump kept those people in check.
Let's switch gears. I want to talk about the continuing opioid crisis in West Virginia. Last year, more than 1,400 people died from drug overdoses in this state. One of your opponents, Capito, has called for the death penalty for certain drug dealers. You've been very open about your recovery from alcohol and drugs. What do you think about Capito's proposal?
I'm all for it. I think that certain drug dealers should be sentenced to death. I also think pedophiles should be sentenced to death. That's another thing that nobody ever really talks about. That's another major issue. What's happened in West Virginia, though, is an absolute shame. We were literally pumped by Big Pharma. They pumped pain pills in here and got us all sick and hooked and addicted. Now we've got open borders where all the heroin and the fentanyl's coming across the border. The Chinese government's producing the chemicals, shipping it over to the drug cartels in Mexico. They're making the fentanyl, and it's coming across our border and it's coming across the ports. This is a really, really bad issue, and we got to make sure not only to tap down and close our borders, we have to make sure that our people in West Virginia have a fighting chance to literally go through recovery and get their lives straightened out.
Give us one specific thing you would do as government to end the drug scourge.
I think it starts with making sure that law enforcement is strengthened and has the ability to actually get people that are committing crimes and putting them in prison, but also giving them the opportunity to go through rehabilitation. That's one of the definite things that needs to happen. The other thing is that we need to strengthen what rehabilitation is, because I think we get that all wrong. And this is from my own personal experience being sober for 20 years. We don't do rehabilitation right. We get it wrong. And we need to make sure and focus on rewiring the pathways to the brain of the addict, make sure that there's rigorous exercise, jobs, and responsibilities inside of communities. And then also, we need to train them on trades too, because the number one reason for relapse, Mark, you know what it is? Lack of economic opportunity or lack of economic mobility. And we got to get back to teaching people how to do stuff, because we got an entire generation of kids that went off to college and they got degrees in stuff like art history, and now they're strapped with student debt and living in their parents' basement. We need more plumbers, we need more carpenters, we need more masons, we need more boilermakers, we need people that can build stuff and do stuff.
I promised we would bring the discussion back to taxes, so let's go there. West Virginia has one of the highest gas taxes in the region. We pay 36 cents a gallon compared to 26 cents in Virginia, 27 cents in Maryland, 29 cents in Kentucky, and thank goodness we're not Pennsylvania because they're the highest in the nation at 57. Given the fact that gas prices have spiked a lot, and I'm sure you hear a lot about this at your dealerships.
Yes, sir.
Would you talk about cutting the gas tax or taking a gas tax holiday for a while to give some taxpayers relief?
There's not a tax on the books that I would not consider cutting, including the personal income tax, the gas tax. We got to get rid of the inventory, machinery, and equipment taxes on businesses because West Virginia stands a fighting chance, but we have to create an economy that thrives. And I hate to break it to everybody, but capital, investment in business, it flows like water to the places that it's most welcome. And we have to make West Virginia welcome to investment, and we have to make West Virginia welcome to the money that is out there, because that's how we're going to create an economy that thrives.
We've got 2 minutes to go here, and that leads to my next question. Do you favor eliminating the personal income tax in West Virginia? We cut it 21% last year. It may get cut another 10% this year. We're waiting for the triggers to kick in. That's $2 billion a year. It's 40% of the state budget. If you're in favor of getting rid of it, how do you replace that revenue?
Well, you replace it with economic growth and development. What you do is that all that money that stays in the taxpayers' hands gets spent inside of an economy, and it literally grows and grows and grows and grows, and that's how you grow the tax revenue, is through transactions. So what you do is you create an economy that thrives, and the economic growth will dramatically offset the tax revenue that we're worried about losing. Plus, when we're talking about running state government like a business, you can't tell me that there's not layers of inefficiencies where we can actually reduce a bunch of waste. Because, like, if I ran my businesses the way the government spends our tax dollars, I'd be broke. And so there'll be no more $300 hammers, no more wasteful spending. Everything will be in check. We'll get the entire state organized and make sure that us as taxpayers, our tax dollars are represented by the actions of the government. And we're going to look at the people out there, the taxpayers, as customers and valued shareholders.
We've got about 50 seconds left. I've got to ask you about coal, fossil fuel, and green energy. A lot of people are embracing, Governor Justice, Senator Manchin, what they call the all-of-the-above energy strategy. What's Chris Miller's energy strategy? 45 seconds.
We've got a bunch of coal. We have a bunch of natural gas. There's more water that passes through our state than any other state in the country, and we have more potential to produce geothermal heat than Saudi Arabia can in BTUs with the natural gas. When we add all that stuff up, we're going to make West Virginia the state in the union with the cheapest power in the country and use that for the foundation of our economic growth and development. Businesses will come to us, but you also think about Jim and Susie Adkins. Both of them are on Social Security and they're 70 years old. You cut their power bill by 70%, you've done something incredibly impactful for them too.
We'll have to leave it there. Businessman Chris Miller, thanks for joining us on our forum. Best of luck on primary day, and we'll be talking soon.
Mark, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Amanda, back to you.
Coming up, hear from former delegate Moore Capito as he faces criticism for resigning from the House of Delegates. And Secretary of State Mac Warner's thoughts on reproductive rights. Stay with us. Introduce you to former West Virginia delegate Moore Capito. Capito is 41 years old and was born in Charleston. His undergraduate degree is from Duke University, and he received his law degree from Washington and Lee University. During his fourth term in the House, he stepped down to run for governor. Once again, here's the host of Inside West Virginia Politics, Mark Curtis.
Thank you, Amanda. And with us now is Moore Capito, former member of the House of Delegates, former chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Great to have you on the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark.
Let's talk about the gentleman you want to replace if you're elected governor, and that's Governor Jim Justice. He's in his 8th year as governor. When he began in 2017, West Virginia was ranked 41st in 7 different key areas. Now we are 46, so we've actually dropped, and in fact, we're dead last among all 50 states when it comes to health care and infrastructure, and near dead last in education. Given what I just said, what grade would you give Governor Justice as he leaves office, and why?
Well, you know, Mark, I would give Governor Justice an A, and here is why. When I came into office with Governor Justice, the state of West Virginia was looking at a $500 million deficit. If you rewind to last year, in just 7 years, we saw a $2 billion surplus in the state of West Virginia, delivered the largest tax cut in the history of the state of West Virginia, and I was proud to work with Governor Justice to put forward the largest tax cut in the history of the state. We've seen record low unemployment numbers in the state of West Virginia, and our net migration numbers of people that are coming into West Virginia are beating the numbers of those that are going out. But here's, I think, what really resonates as I've traveled all across this great state that we have, is that people in the state of West Virginia are starting to feel good again. And as I heard it said the other night when I was in Jackson County, it felt like for the past 7 to 8 years, we've been pushing a boulder up the hill in West Virginia from an economic standpoint. And now it's rolling down the other side so fast we can't catch it. We have a lot of work to do, but Governor Justice has been a consequential leader for the state of West Virginia, and he's going to be a great United States Senator.
You said we have a lot of work to do, so I assume there are areas that he didn't finish what he started, or maybe didn't get something across the finish line. What issues would you specifically focus in on that maybe Governor Justice didn't complete?
Well, I think what we've done together in West Virginia that has really started the momentum is building jobs in West Virginia. We know we want to grow in West Virginia. And how do we grow in West Virginia, Mark? We got to create opportunity. Look at the opportunities that we've created with Nucor and Procter & Gamble and Clorox and LG. That takes a collaborative effort to talk to these employers, to get them to West Virginia, to set the stage and create the environment to where employers are now coming to West Virginia. I think one of the biggest things that we can do going forward is really pursue our entrepreneurship and innovation in the state of West Virginia. Just yesterday, I was in Morgantown, West Virginia, seeing some of the really great incubators that are going on there. Day one, as your governor, I will appoint a chief innovation officer so that all of our entrepreneurs in West Virginia and innovators have a conduit to the governor's office so that we can ensure that anybody that comes up with that idea, whether you're just taking your kid to school or you're at work and you say, why don't we have something for this? To make sure that that person can build that idea right here in West Virginia.
Last question about Governor Justice. You use a lot of imagery of him in your ads and in your materials, and you two appearing together. Are you trying to suggest he's endorsing you, or are you asking him to endorse you?
We've worked together great, Mark, over the past, and like I said, we came in the same election cycle, and we've done great things together. And I think it's important for the people of West Virginia to know that we're going to continue the work that Governor Justice has done in fixing our roads, in bringing employers to West Virginia, and really showing the rest of the country how special West Virginia is.
A few months ago, you resigned your seat in the House of Delegates, and one of your opponents in this race, Mac Warner, said that makes you a, quote, quitter. And he said West Virginia hates a quitter. Did you quit on the 18,000 voters who elected you to serve in the House of Delegates?
What is the most important thing that we have in 2024 is this election. And I know that the voters of West Virginia all across this state want to see their next governor. They want to talk to their next governor. But most importantly, Mark, I think they want their next governor to listen to them. So I felt it was incredibly important to take as much time as I possibly could to spend all of those hours dedicated to the people of West Virginia. So when we stepped away from the legislature, I didn't feel as though it was appropriate on the taxpayer dollar for me to be out on the campaign trail. Now you look at somebody like Patrick Morrisey, our Attorney General, who's out campaigning as we're paying for his salary as Attorney General. And I don't think that's right.
Let's talk about some issues, reproductive rights being one of them. In West Virginia, abortions are illegal except in cases of rape, incest, or the life of the mother. Do you support those exemptions, or should the abortion ban apply to all pregnancies?
Mark, I've always been very pro-life. I have a 100% pro-life voting record in my legislative service. As chairman of the Judiciary Committee, I put forward dozens of bills to protect the life of the unborn here in the state of West Virginia. I was very proud to work on the piece of legislation that made West Virginia a flagship pro-life state, and will continue to do that as governor.
So you support the exemptions?
We have a great bill in place, and I have a record showing that support.
What about in vitro fertilization, a related issue? We've had that court decision down in Alabama. What do you say to the women and couples in the state who want to have children, want to have a family, but their only option is in vitro fertilization? Will that continue under a Capito administration?
Well, we're pro-life in West Virginia, and there are a lot of families out there that want to have children, and I think we need to encourage them to be able to do that.
Let's talk about former President Trump, because certainly he casts a shadow across this race. You called President Trump, quote, the ultimate champion of the Republican Party, and said he must win in November to save our country. The other candidates we've had in here, they all haul out their pictures of them standing next to Donald Trump. Yet we don't. Is there a picture of more Capito and Donald Trump together?
I've met the president before, and like I said there, President Trump has revolutionized the Republican Party, and that's also revolutionized the Republican Party in West Virginia. I mean, look at the coalition that the president built here in West Virginia. President Trump brought West Virginia voters to the Republican Party here in West Virginia like nobody ever has. And now West Virginia is a complete and deep red state thanks to President Trump. He built the greatest economy that we have seen in this country in my adulthood, to be sure. And I think it's critically important that President Trump wins in November, because I truly believe that he's going to make West Virginia a huge part of his economic plan. And he said that, Mark. So I think it's very important.
So you met him one time, but in hindsight, do you regret not taking a photograph with him or taking a selfie with your cell phone or something?
I support President Trump. I've endorsed him. We've made that very clear, and we think that the most important thing that this country can do to get us back on the right track is to make sure that Donald Trump's our next president.
All right. Well, I asked because his son, Donald Trump Jr., said some harsh things about you and your family on X after your mom, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, voted in favor of Ukraine's spending. He said, quote, she's not up for re-election this year, but her rhino son is running for governor of West Virginia. He then urged his followers to oppose you. Rhino meaning Republican in name only. How do you address that criticism from Donald Trump Jr.?
What I would say, Mark, is that as the chair of the Judiciary Committee for 3 years in the state of West Virginia, I am proud to be running in this race as the Get It Done conservative. And what I mean by that is I built the most conservative agenda and passed it in the history of the state of West Virginia. We live in a very conservative state. And as a conservative, we want somebody that's shown an ability to take good ideas and turn them into good public policy. And I'm somebody that passed that conservative agenda, the most conservative agenda in the history of the state.
Quickly, the last question on President Trump. There's a possibility he could be convicted of a felony between now and Election Day. Will you still endorse, support, and in fact vote for him on November 5th, even if he's a convicted felon?
I think what's happening, Mark, is all across the country, people are starting to become a little bit, quite frankly, disgusted with the weaponization of the Justice Department. I mean, how in the world that we live in today, can we have a seated president having his Justice Department going against his political opponent? It cuts across everything that we are as Americans, and I think it's wrong.
So you'll vote for him no matter what?
I think that the Justice Department is targeting Donald Trump.
Let's talk about taxes for a moment here. First of all, we have one of the highest gas taxes in the region at 36 cents a gallon. Some of our neighbors like Virginia, 26 cents, Maryland, 27 cents. Folks are hurting right now because gas prices have skyrocketed once again. Would you consider cutting the gas tax or having a gas tax holiday when you get into office?
Well, Mark, I'm the only person in this race that's actually cut taxes in the state of West Virginia. I put in a plan in place to reduce the personal income tax to zero, which I will absolutely plan to accelerate as the governor in the state of West Virginia. But when we look at everything that's going on in the country right now, and we look at the terrible policies of President Joe Biden, the out-of-control spending, and what it's caused as it relates to inflation in this country, and then look at the way that we're fighting those headwinds in the state of West Virginia by passing tax cuts that are giving more money in people's pockets so they can live better lives.
We're down to about a minute. I want to get to the drug issue. Last year we had over 1,400 people die in the state of drug overdoses. You can see on the chart we're putting up that the numbers have been high for years now, but we are the worst, highest per capita death rate in the nation. Please, as governor, tell us one thing you would do, one specific thing, to try and turn the tide on the drug scourge in the state.
Well, number one, we have to make sure that we're protecting our people. Patrick Morrisey is the Attorney General, is a former big pharma lobbyist. His family lobbying firm took millions of dollars from these opioid makers, and then he cut a sweetheart deal which reeks of corruption. So we have to make sure that we get those people out of the way that are working with the drug companies instead of working for West Virginians. I will make sure that anybody pushing fentanyl in the streets of West Virginia faces prison for life, because we need to take the supply off of the streets. I'm the author of the bill that bans sanctuary cities in the state of West Virginia. I'm very proud of that. We have zero, and as your governor, we will continue to have zero.
30 seconds. Governor Justice sent National Guard troops to the Texas border to help there with the interdiction of migrants coming in. Would you do the same thing?
Absolutely. We need to secure the southern border. We know that every state's a border state. There are too many illegal immigrants in this state, and we have to stop it.
Former House of Delegates member and chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Capito, thanks for joining us. Best wishes on primary day.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.
You're very welcome. Amanda, back to you.
Our fourth and final candidate tonight is Secretary of State Mac Warner. Warner is 69 years old and was born in Charleston. He's a graduate of West Point and also has law degrees from West Virginia University and the University of Virginia School of Law. He served 23 years in the United States Army. Upon his retirement, he worked for the U.S. State Department. He is now in his second term as Secretary of State. Here again is the host of Inside West Virginia Politics, Mark Curtis.
Thank you, Amanda. Indeed, we are joined now by Secretary of State Mac Warner, two-term Secretary of State, now running for governor of West Virginia. Great to have you on the program.
Good to be with you, Mark. Thanks.
Let's talk about the man you wish to succeed, Governor Jim Justice. He is in his 8th year as governor. According to U.S. News and World Report, West Virginia is dead last amongst all 50 states when it comes to health care, education, and infrastructure. We are 47th in both economy and education. Overall, the state is ranked 46th across all 7 categories, leading indicators. What grade would you give Governor Justice as he leaves office, given those numbers?
Governor Justice has done some good things for the state of West Virginia, but we have so much more we can do. We have a promising future ahead of us, and with me, it's going to start with education. If we can fix education in West Virginia, move ourselves up in the ranking, but the key is to get people reading at grade level by grade 3. If you can do that, then they're going to be able to see the first 3 years of education, you're learning to read. After that, you're reading to learn. You have to be able to read. And I don't think we've done enough with regards to teachers, education, and getting that golden triangle, the teachers, the parents, and the students working together, but always keeping that focus on the students. So I think that's where we need to go with this state.
All right, the question was give Governor Justice a grade. Give us a grade, a numerical grade.
A-, B+, something in that range. Okay. He's done good things, but there's so much more we could be doing.
I was going to say, what has he left on the table, or what has he not completed that will be at the top of your agenda as we go forth?
Well, one, I'll be living in the governor's mansion. I'll be at work every day, probably the first one in, the last one to leave. My wife and I have been married 41 years. We will be there as a couple, being the first couple of the state of West Virginia and promoting it. So the things that bother me are when we talk about government surpluses, but yet we have these shortages with teachers, with the pay, corrections facilities, medical examiners, roads. We have so many things that need to be done in this state. I don't think we have surpluses if we would be spending it right and setting our priorities correctly.
Have you asked the governor for his endorsement, or do you anticipate getting an endorsement from Governor Justice?
I have not asked him for an endorsement. That's just not where I'm at.
Okay, let's talk about some of the issues. Reproductive rights. In West Virginia, abortions are illegal except in cases of rape, incest, or the life of the mother. Do you support those exceptions, or should the abortion ban apply to all pregnancies?
Mark, my anchor in life is Jesus Christ, is my Christian religion. And so everything with me starts with God. In the beginning, God. So it's very clear, life begins at conception. So that's where I am personally. However, as the chief executive officer for the state, I intend to work very closely with the legislature. And this is a wonderful legislature, 100 delegates from all over the state, 34 senators from all over the state. If they decide to do some exceptions, then it will be my role to work with the legislature and go with and I think they've done a good job of setting up the right exceptions to the abortion issue.
In a related issue, tell us about your position on in vitro fertilization. We, of course, had the recent Supreme Court case in Alabama essentially saying embryos are children. They share those rights. What do you say to the women and couples in West Virginia in terms of whether IVF will be available still in West Virginia under a Warner administration?
The Alabama court got it right. Life begins at conception. So once that sperm fertilizes the egg, you have an embryo, which is a human being, a human life. So what we have to do with the in vitro fertilization is to make sure it's done with care, and that is we can fertilize one egg at a time and work with that in an individual. If it takes, great. If it doesn't, then you go to the next. We don't have to be fertilizing dozens of eggs at a time or holding them in a situation, because then you get into that situation. What do you do with those? And the answer to that is you donate them. You work with other people that want to have babies that can't. So we can just do it more closely in line with a biblical perspective, and that is when you fertilize that egg, you have a human life.
I want to talk about someone who looms large in this race. Former President Donald Trump will be the nominee for the third consecutive cycle for the Republican Party's nomination for president. You had a picture taken with President Trump. Tell us the circumstances, where this was and when, and what the conversation was like.
That was in Wheeling, and I had the opportunity to ride with him in the presidential limo. My wife and I had a very pleasant conversation. Personally, he is a very engaging individual, and I'm a very strong supporter of President Trump, especially his policies. I think he had this country moving in the right direction with energy independence, closing the border, a strong economy, all those sorts of things. Strong national defense, kept us out of wars. I have 4 children, all of whom have served in the military, as I know your daughter is. And so that's what I support, is somebody that's going to keep us out of wars and only go to war if it's the United States is threatened.
Given your relationship, why do you think he has not endorsed you? And I should point out, he has not endorsed any candidate in this race. And would you ask for his endorsement?
I would love to have President Trump's endorsement, but he's got a lot of people and a lot of races all across this country to worry about. I'll do just fine here in West Virginia by talking to the voters. And that's one thing we're doing right now, is talking to the voters. Notice what we've had to do in this forum right here is go to individual, because these other candidates don't want to face the voters face to face with the other candidates so they can compare and contrast in person. I'm not going to run for that. The other candidates have run from debates. You're not going to have that with Mac Warner.
All right, one last question on President Trump. There, of course, exists the possibility he could be convicted of a felony. He faces multiple criminal charges between now and Election Day. If he is convicted, a convicted felon, will you still endorse him, support him, and indeed vote for him on November 5th?
I don't endorse anybody. I'm the Secretary of State, and I'm the Chief Elections Officer for the state, so I don't get involved in other people's races. I do support President Trump's policies, and so they've come after him with everything they possibly can, and so many of the things they've come after him with for 7 years now, since he was first elected, even before he was elected in 2016, has proven to be wrong. The Steele dossier, and I could go through on and on of the things they've come after him with, so I'm not going to be worried about if they try to hang a felony conviction. Let's go to the Supreme Court, or let's go to the appeals court to see whether that sticks.
You stirred, and I thought that was my last question, but I'm reminded you stirred quite a controversy last fall when you went on not just our television stations, but national media, saying that the CIA and FBI stole this election for President Biden. I mean, what's the evidence?
They did. The former CIA director and others, Brennan, Clapper, Panetta, Hayden, they all signed this bogus letter that they knew was bogus. And yet they put that out to the American people 2 weeks before the election, and President Biden, in the debate with Trump, used that and said that it had been debunked when it wasn't. It was an intentional lie that Tony Blinken, our current Secretary of State, put out, and the former CIA agents ran with it, and the FBI covered it up. They had that Hunter Biden laptop for 11 months. They knew it was real, and they kept their mouth shut. Toleration of a lie is just as bad as the lie itself, so that's why that election was stolen.
Do you think the truth will ever really come out?
It is coming out.
Okay.
Jim Jordan in the House Judiciary is exposing it.
Okay, let's talk about another issue, and that's the issue of drugs. Still a huge problem here in West Virginia. More than 1,400 people died from drug overdoses in this state last year. As you can see on the chart, we're going to put up on the screen for you. Those numbers have been high for years now, and in some instances, we've had the highest per capita overdose death rate in America. As governor, please give us one specific thing you are going to do to tackle the drug issue.
I will work with Donald Trump in securing the border. That's the first thing we have to do. That's where all this fentanyl and things are coming from. So securing the border is the answer, but I have a lot more ideas with regards to that, and it goes back to education, educating our young people not to get involved, giving them hope, giving them a strong economy. All that works together to get the people away from the drug epidemic.
Tax is always a big issue in election year. We'll talk about a couple of varieties of taxes here. First of all, the gas tax. We have the highest, one of the highest in the region at 36 cents a gallon. I believe it's 26 cents in Virginia, 27 cents in Maryland, 29 cents in Kentucky. Of course, the highest in the nation is our friends to the north in Pennsylvania at 57 cents, at least for Pennsylvania. But given the fact that gas prices have shot up dramatically in the last several weeks, would you consider cutting the gas tax or suspending the gas tax for a time to help West Virginians with their pocketbooks?
Mark, I am a Republican, okay, and I support all the tenets of the Republican platform, and one of those is reducing taxes. In fact, I've been a Republican longer than the other three candidates combined, so I embrace right to life, strong national defense, all the things that Republicans support, so lowering taxes is part of it, but you have to take taxes in its entirety, because if you cut taxes in one area, are you going to increase them somewhere else? I don't want to have to do that, and so you have to prioritize. You just can't look at things in isolation. And that's what I intend to do. I think that, again, working with the legislature, I think that Vernon Criss in the House, you have Eric Tarr in the Senate, I think they've taken a very appropriate approach to reducing taxes. We want to get rid of that personal income tax so we can be competitive with other states. But I think they've done it in a step fashion, which I think is the adult in the room approach.
I want to drill down on that a little bit because some of the other opponents in this race have said a phased out reduction, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. You have Chris Miller saying, no, do it on day one. And you've said that is, quote, irresponsible. Why?
It is irresponsible because you're going to cut out half of the state's general revenue, and what are you going to cut those programs, or what are you going to replace it with? And that's what he hasn't answered. So that's why I think, again, the House and Senate are taking a very disciplined approach to that, and that's what you need to do with taxes.
For down to 2 minutes, I would like to get to the coal and energy issue. The state has recruited large companies to West Virginia that support green energy initiatives in conjunction with coal and other fossil fuels. Do you support what's become to be known as the all-of-the-above energy strategy for West Virginia instead of being solely focused on coal and gas?
I do look at all the above, okay? I do support that, but the market should decide, not the government, not the state government, not the federal government, picking and choosing winners and losers. And so I think we let the market decide. I'm a capitalist. I'm back to that Republican base that I come from, and that's what we need to do with regards to energy. Let the market decide, and that is not phasing out coal arbitrarily or oil or gas. The fossil fuels, that's the baseline. You have reliable energy and unreliable. The fossil fuels are the reliable energy.
We're down to 1.5 minutes, and I want to circle back to the border and drug issue again. Governor Jim Justice sent National Guard troops to Texas to help with border security. I think we sent 50 of our National Guard troops for a month's time. That cost the state of West Virginia approximately $1 million. Was that a wise use of taxpayers' money, and would you as governor send troops to the border, or is that really a federal issue?
It's both, and so our troops are part of the National Guard program, and if the governor thinks that's appropriate, and I think that it was. We talked about the opioid crisis. We have to shut down that border. So I will join with Governor Abbott in Texas, DeSantis in Florida, Youngkin in Virginia on education, Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas. I'll join that coalition of conservative Republicans and make West Virginia part of this national effort to shut down the opioid crisis.
We're down to about 40 seconds. Real quick, you mentioned on drug use, you mentioned law enforcement, and you mentioned education. You've said nothing about treatment. Where do you stand on drug treatment and sobriety?
Sure. Oh, that's absolutely part of it, okay? The opposite of addiction is connection. When people lose their connectivity from their family, from their jobs, that sort of thing, that's when they turn to drugs. And so obviously working with mental health officials to do the treatment, that's very essential, an essential component of it.
Secretary of State Mac Warner, candidate on the Republican nomination for governor of West Virginia. We wish you the best on primary day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Amanda, back to you.
And we'll be back to wrap things up in just a minute. Stay with us. Back to a primetime edition of Inside West Virginia Politics. I'm Amanda Barron alongside Mark Curtis. What an hour.
Yeah, it was quite an hour. I learned a lot about each of these candidates. You know, I like this forum format because in a debate, sometimes they shout each other down or talk over each other. It turns into a food fight. I thought this was a very civil discussion of the issues.
I want to talk to you about the 29% of people, voters out there, according to our poll, who are still undecided at this point. Do you think there was anything said during this forum that moved that needle?
You know, they get to see the candidates' personalities and their demeanor, and I think that's something that potentially appeals to people. It's not just the issues. They want to know, what's this guy going to be like if he gets in office? And I think our forum, I think, probably helps some people make up their minds.
Yeah, you can see personalities, that's for sure. We know one commonality between these four men. They're all very loyal to President Trump. And I want to ask you, why is that so important?
It's so important because Donald Trump, nowhere in this nation is he more popular than in the state of West Virginia. He won here twice with 69% of the vote. President Trump will be at the top of the ticket this year, this November, and that has a trickle-down effect. It does affect down ballot races for U.S. Senate, for governor, House of Delegates, state Senate. It affects everything, his popularity.
Yes, and it'll be interesting to see how many people go out to the polls during this primary election. One thing is they all want to eliminate the personal income tax. There's just some key differences on how one of them wants to do that.
You've got to look for nuances here, and here's one, and this is very important. Chris Miller wants to do it basically on day one of the legislative session. He can't do it without the legislature, but he wants to immediately remove the personal income tax. We cut it 21% last year. The other three candidates say no. It's got to be phased out over maybe 3 to 5 years. Look, this is 40% of the state budget. It is $2 billion, and the other three candidates are saying to Chris Miller, where are you going to make up that money if you cut it right away?
Well, we'll find out what the voters have to say here very soon. Early voting begins for the primary election in West Virginia on May 1st.
And election day, primary election day, is May the 14th,
and
Tuesday.
Stick with your local election headquarters for all of the updates on this race and for all the information you might need as you head to the polls. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night.